Light Comes to Shadow Mountain by Tony Buzzio. A content area jazz by me, Amelia Willard.
October 4th, 1937. Electricity is coming to 1,000 square miles in southeastern Kentucky that will be served by the newly incorporated and recently funded Southeast Counties Rural Electric Cooperative Corporation.
Electricity was coming to Appalachian Kentucky in the 1930s, but what impact did the electrification have on Appalachia and its inhabitants?
Currently, 90% of Americans living in the cities have access to electricity, while only 10% of rural Americans enjoy its benefits.
Electricity was divisive during this time. The implementation of electricity in Appalachia provided a way for Appalachian culture to be preserved and prevent the migration of Appalachians into cities. Though Appalachians were not suffering due to the lack of electricity, they were not provided the improved living conditions that city folk were accustomed to. This sentiment is echoed in the Limited Access Appalachians in the Golden Age of Radio journal article written by Philip Obermiller, who wrote specifically, academic studies, census data, government reports, and oral histories reveal rural Appalachians' minimal access to the radio programming that many assumed they enjoyed. During the 1930s, the few radio owners in eastern Kentucky, for example, were predominantly professionals and business people living in towns.
Shadow Mountain does not have electric lines, but luckily the hospital does. The staff member on duty at the hospital that night, Nurse Florence Bailey, kept Radiance warm in an incubator that could only be made with an electric light bulb.
Due to electricity, jobs in the medical profession became much easier, which led to more lives saved. Electricity provided an added advantage to doctors and nurses, as it gave them more advanced equipment that could lead to saving more lives. Electricity played a big role in the advancement of other industries as well. Electricity made working on farms easier. It provided electric pumps for irrigation and other agricultural equipment that increased productivity and crop yields. In the article Electrifying Rural America, the author, Tim Sablick, highlights how electricity aided farmers. He said, electric lights and modern appliances made life easier and farms more productive. Electricity also drew industries to the region, providing desperately needed jobs. It boosted productivity for dairy farmers, thanks to electric milking parlors and refrigerated storage tanks that reduced losses due to spoilage. Electric heat lamps and watering systems improved the egg production of chickens at poultry farms. In many cases, the gains in productivity meant that these and other machines more than paid for themselves. The implementation of electricity in rural areas led to an overall improvement of life for those who lived there. Tim Sablick also mentioned that substituting electric lights for kerosene lamps boosted nighttime illumination and reduced smoke inhalation, improving overall health. Washing machines saved hours of housework, hours that could be reallocated to other tasks. These improved amenities made rural life more attractive, reducing the incentives to move to the city. Electricity also enabled the expansion of other industries in rural communities, such as in the construction and service sectors, leading to long-run economic benefits.
This discrepancy was a large impetus for President Franklin D. Roosevelt's support for the Rural Electrification Act, which passed last year and provides federal loans to cooperative electric power companies.
According to the NRECA, the idea of providing federal assistance to accomplish rural electrification gained ground rapidly when President Roosevelt took office in 1933. On May 11, 1935, Roosevelt signed Executive Order No. 7037, establishing the Rural Electrification Administration, or REA. It was not until a year later that the Rural Electrification Act was passed, and the lending program that became the REA got underway.
Mommy worries on the edge of her white woven blanket that covers her lap. I've been in such a dark time these last months, Cora. These thoughts of any change has completely overwhelmed me.
There were multiple reasons for opposition to rural electrification in the 1930s, which included cost. It was expensive to provide electricity to rural areas. Consumer resistance. People were reluctant to buy new technologies even after signing up for electricity. And unfamiliarity. People were unfamiliar with electricity and modern appliances and didn't know how to use them. Many people were facing an unprecedented event, and they believed that the implementation would disrupt their traditional Appalachian lifestyles and values. They feared it would lead to a decline in community and family ties, as well as a loss of self-sufficiency. Not only that, but electricity was a new and mysterious technology, and some people were wary of its potential dangers. Despite these initial concerns, many Appalachian communities eventually embraced electricity, recognizing its potential to improve their quality of life. Light Comes to Shadow Mountain shows us the impacts that the development of electricity had on the folks that lived in Appalachian Kentucky in the 1930s. It also gives us an inside perspective on how Cora made up her own opinion about electricity coming to Shadow Mountain. In this book, and even in all of history, there are two sides, or even more than two sides, to every story. And we can learn from this book that we must analyze every side and perspective before we come to our own conclusion.